Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to be talking about specifically the very best tabletop role-playing game, new core rulebook, not a source book, freestanding, that was published in the 4th week of July 2018. And that tabletop role-playing game is Fellowship 2nd Edition. It was created by Jacob Randolph, and the game is focused, if Fellowship reminds you of Fellowship of the Rings, that is on purpose. It is the Fellowship tabletop role-playing game specifically is covering, is creating an environment for groups of adventurers, right? Just like the Fellowship, there was 9 adventurers. They were all adventured together. You know, some of the group would split off here and there, but it was a traveling adventure group. And so this tabletop role-playing game is specifically structured to tell the story of a traveling adventure group. However, it is structured so that you could tell that story across multiple different worlds, right? So essentially, you could use Fellowship 2nd Edition to tell a Middle Earth story, right, with a group of Middle Earth, characters. You could also use this same game to run a Avatar: Last Airbender type traveling group adventure. And last, you can use it to structure any game where you would have a traveling group of adventurers. It is primarily fantasy based, although you can go a little beyond that, right? It's a very interesting game. What is its rule set? Its rule set is loose PBTA, loosed Powered by the Apocalypse. By the way, the Powered by the Apocalypse games are starting. There's a little bit of a division on how they're referred to. Many people call them PBTA. I like this new name. It's Apocalypse Engine. All right. So the rules. It is a loose Apocalypse Engine, right? Which means they took the Apocalypse Engine, the PBTA engine, and they are specifically using it to create this specific rule set. Although it does diverge from the Apocalypse Engine here and there. What are some of the... Well, actually, so Apocalypse Engine games by Apocalypse World game, Apocalypse Engine games are games that use the same engine as Vincent Baker's Apocalypse World. Okay. So, with that said, those games have quite a bit of storytelling element in them, rather than crunchy game master player traditional Dungeons and Dragons type structure. They give more agency to players. This game, Fellowship 2nd Edition, goes even further, right? And I'll give you an example. So if you're a player in this, so there's the Overlord and there's the player, and the Overlord is actually instructed to make their own character. Okay, even though they do run other non-player characters, they actually make their own character in the game, right? Which is pretty unusual, right? Because a lot of times it's one of the bigger problems in tabletop role-playing games is, if the game master has kind of like a super OP NPC who solves problem, it's actually a very, very problematic aspect in a lot of tabletop role-playing games. This game is aware of that and moves forward with it. But the Overlord essentially serves as the GM, but has elements of the player. Now check this out. If you're a player and you create an elf in this game, you define what the elves look like in that world, right? So if you're not using an existing IP, intellectual property, which you can use any intellectual property you want as long as it's your own private game, you can do whatever game you want, right? But basically, if you have your own world, the way they have it structured, if you choose to be an elf, you actually define what the culture of the elves is, what the society of the elves is, what the politics of the elves are. Whatever your player character identifies as, you have special authority to define that element within the game. So, to be super clear, what's happening with this game is really, so whenever you get into tabletop role-playing, when you start to go into the indie end of the pool for tabletop role-playing games, there's a thing that happens, which is this a tabletop role-playing game or is this a storytelling game? If you don't know what a storytelling game is, the best example of one is The Quiet Year. It's a fantastic storytelling game, and it allows you to tell stories in a group, but its structure is very, very unlike most tabletop role-playing games. One of the biggest divisions between a storytelling game and a tabletop role-playing game is that you don't have a GM. And this game goes right up to the line. It does have an overlord, but it really is putting the player in the position of the game master many of the times, and it is definitely taking power away from the game master and giving it to players, right? But it's enough of there's enough of the raw structure and core bones of a tabletop role-playing game for me to identify it as a tabletop role-playing game. And this really was the very best new tabletop role-playing game, freestanding core rulebook, not a source book, that was published in the 4th week of July 2018. I think Fellowship 2E is a really unique game, and it adds, what does this bring to the community, right? Well, the reality is it gives you another, really, Dungeon World already exists, but this is another way to tell stories, and this one is hyper-focused on a group of people adventuring together. And so I think it's really nice that there's an additional fantasy-based game that is powered by the apocalypse that players can choose from, give them a little bit of different flavor, and allow you some more options. In addition to that, this also adds to the incredibly growing, what's the word for it? Prestige, I want to use that word, of Vincent Baker. So the Apocalypse engine continues to grow. It is an incredibly attractive system rule setting, and Vincent Baker's rules are so inspiring to so many new game creators that a lot of games now really have that PBTA, that Apocalypse engine rule set. And this is another one. So PBTA grows with this game, and the Apocalypse engine, those are synonymous. I think I'm going to use Apocalypse engine going forward. It's a little more clear. I think it's better than PBTA because people don't really know what that is. So Apocalypse engine is a better name. And Fellowship 2E is an excellent addition to the Apocalypse engine system, rules, worlds, settings. Although this is completely freestanding, and you can run this with nothing more than this core rulebook. So I definitely recommend it. I think it's a really neat niche within the tabletop role-playing game sphere. And if you have tried it, let me know what you think about it in the comments below, please. Also, I'd love to know what do you think? PBTA or Apocalypse engine? Do you think one's better than the other? Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.